Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Again, I'm Emily Sumner, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Today's webinar is brought to you by EdWeb and ParentPowered, the creator of an accessible, evidence-based family engagement curriculum for birth through 12th grade that supports, inspires, and activates parents and caregivers with simple, strengths-based insights they can turn to and turn into everyday teachable moments. Let's go ahead and get started. I am excited to welcome Rebecca Honig and Mary Westervelt, both with ParentPowered, to join me.
Thank you, Emily. And we are so happy to be here and can't thank you all enough for joining us on what is, in my part of the country, a very snowy day. First snow of the season. I'm Rebecca Honig. I'm the Chief Content and Curriculum Officer at ParentPowered. So I lead our team in developing our curriculum and writing our messages, where we communicate with over 700,000 families 3 times a week with strength-based, doable ways to support learning and development. And before joining ParentPowered, I spent over a decade working at Sesame Street and other producers of children's media like PBS, Scholastic, and Nickelodeon and Disney. And I was first there as a curriculum specialist and then as a writer. And whether I was reviewing someone else's script or crafting my own, I have literally logged tens of thousands of hours working to find just right ways to say something in order to engage an audience of parents, caregivers, and children. So I will bring all of that to our conversation today as we talk about strength-based communication strategies. I also started out as a teacher and have had the chance to collaborate with educators around the world. And I have 3 kids of my own, and I'm constantly drawing on those on-the-ground experiences in everything that I write and in every communication I have. And I'm joined by my fantastic colleague, Mary, who will tell you about herself now.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks for that sweet tee-up. I'm Mary Westervelt, Director of Marketing and Communication at ParentPowered. And since Rebecca and I first began working together, we found that our work and how we each contribute to that act of getting our message out and what do we want that message to be has really complemented each other well. So we wanted to give this presentation together to, share the combined experiences that we have in our different roles. So as a bit of background, I've spent almost 2 decades in marketing and communications, and where I've been responsible for figuring out how do you share a message that we think is exciting and get other people to be excited about it, compelled enough to stop what they're doing, to pay attention, and then take some kind of an action to begin to develop a relationship with us. And that's not an easy thing to do. There are a lot of tricks of the trade. And as the spouse of a former school administrator, district administrator, I know how critical it is for you to be able to do that same thing, to kind of get a message out to families that they are going to pause what they're doing, focus on what you're saying, understand your message, and then take an action, whether it's filling out forms or coming to events or a critical piece of information about their child's well-being. You want your message to get received, processed, and acted on, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to give you some tips and tricks that'll help you accomplish that goal. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca.
All right. So first order of business, why are we focusing on accessible, strength-based, inclusive communication, right? Why is this so critical? And the short answer is that when our communications with families are strength-based and accessible and inclusive, it feels good, right? It feels good to read. It's actionable, and it builds a sense of efficacy and belonging and trust. And on a really fundamental level, these are the feelings that lead families to engage and ultimately trust and partner with schools. And this is what we want, right? This is the goal because it's best for our schools, for our communities, and for our children. Research has shown time and time again that family engagement leads to better academic outcomes, higher graduation and attendance rates, increased mental health, and overall better life outcomes. But families may be coming to you with preconceived notions that make that engagement extra challenging. Parents and caregivers may have learned through their past lived experiences that school is not, in fact, a place for them, right? Maybe it wasn't encouraged in their country of origin. Maybe they had negative experiences with their own schooling. Maybe they've experienced a lifetime of being disenfranchised from systems that are meant to support them. For those families, and really actually for all families, we need to utilize really intentional strategies within our communications so that we are always giving families the feeling this place is for me, right? We want that to be the feeling they have when we communicate with them. And those are the strategies we're going to talk about here today. We're going to look at tips and tricks for writing manageable messages, in essence, communications that are easy to read, comprehend, and act upon. We're going to look at ways to motivate and inspire action through strength-based language and a clear CTA, as we call it, or call to action. We'll also talk about strategies for ensuring that your messages reach everyone and that the most important information rises to the top, gets read, and feels good to read. Okay, so before we jump into all the little tips and tricks you can try, we want to just start with some two core sort of big overarching ideas that we're going to hold on to throughout this presentation. The first is more of like a kind of a guiding principle. Even though we're going to spend most of our time today talking about written communication, we want to first surface as a big bold header that whenever possible, an email from you, a form in the mail, or a newsletter posted on a district website should not be the first time a family is getting to know you or your district. Research shows that people place far more value, importance, and trust in what's known as hot information versus cold information, right? So hot information is information learned from someone in your social group, basically information from a familiar and trusted source. Warm information, which is like one step down, is of course also better than cold information, and that's information learned from acquaintances. And of course, cold information would be that information learned through research or something that you read about. And when we think about how we seek and get and value advice, this makes sense, right? I mean, if you wanted a good dentist recommendation, sure, you can read reviews, but it's going to mean a lot more to you when it's coming from someone you know, and someone you trust, right? When that person tells you about it, you're a lot more likely to value the information and act upon it. So before we again dive into written communication, let's look at what are some of the ways you can create that warm handoff so that families are learning about your school or being oriented around your school-based protocols and services from someone they trust. We're just going to quickly name a few, right? We all know home visits are one of the best ways to begin establishing trusting relationships with families, actually meeting them in their own comfortable space and getting to know them one-on-one. Family liaisons are another great point of contact where you have other parents. Maybe they share similar lived experiences and can meet and chat with families, connect with families, and begin orienting them around your school or program before they receive, a lot of written communication from you. Another great sort of warm handoff can be your community-based organizations. So where are families already going, and how can you make those places spots where they can learn about your school or district? So for example, if you have a local resettlement agency or newcomer center, can you provide some talking points to staff working within that organization so that when they're welcoming families, they can also tell them about your school or your program? Faith-based organizations can be another place that families are going where they have the trusted relationships in place, and that can be a great place for families to begin learning about you as well. Also, if a child is coming to you from an early childhood center, can that center tell them all about what to expect in your school or district, including what kind of ways you're going to reach out and communicate so that they're kind of bridging that handoff? If you can't do any of that, I would look for ways to have a presence where families are already going. So if there's a cultural event or a festival, can there be a pop-up tent or a table that your school is running so that they can meet you, put a face to a name, learn a little bit about you. You could take them through the district website if you wanted, but that's a great way to kind of begin becoming visible so that they're also connecting you and learning about you in spaces where they're really comfortable going. Playgrounds can be another place to begin meeting families. Also, hosting events like meet and greets, tours of your school, both in person or virtual, or showing up at community workshops to have a presence. Again, all of these are going to help lay the foundation so that when they do get those first communications from you, they're going to have familiarity and a sort of a budding sense of trust right off the bat. All right, so that's like big overarching tip, sort of a thing to kind of hold on. Now we're moving on to written communication. So here we go. All right, so the biggest tip that we want to share is like the umbrella tip, right? It's the bucket that holds everything. It's the tip to guide all of the other tips. The first thing we want to do in any communication we have with our families is we want to picture them. Who is the communication going to? Who makes up your community? Do you have newcomers in your community, English language learners, single parents, families impacted by trauma? You know your families best. So you want to be centering your communication on the people who are going to be receiving it. Then, as you're picturing families, we want to always, always, always in any communication, pause to reflect. All right, so we're holding families in mind and we're reflecting. And as we're reflecting, we're asking some core questions. Is it accessible, right? Are they going to get this communication that I'm sending to them? Is it coming to them in their home language at a reading level that they can comprehend? Is it inclusive? So is it reflecting their lived experiences? If I'm including images, does it reflect the families I serve? Does it work for a family with a child who might have a special need, or a family who has young children versus old children, a child who's being raised, let's say, by a grandparent? So again, is it inclusive? Is it doable, right? If I'm asking families to do something, do they have what they need to do the thing I'm asking them to do? Is it strength-based? And this includes using strength-based language, but also always centering the things we're asking families to do around their strengths, their lived experiences, their cultures, their values, their norms. And on a very fundamental level, we are just asking ourselves, and we're sort of conjuring our families as we ask, how does this feel? How's it going to feel to get this message, to get this form? These are huge guiding questions. And now, everything else that follows, we're going to give you quick tips that help you to kind of address these questions and solve for some of the challenges and some of the barriers, and to help ensure that your communication does feel good and that it is accessible and that it is strength-based. All right, so we're moving on to all the little tips and tricks that are going to help you put those big overarching ideas into action. I'm just going to sidebar here. We're going to share a lot of tips and strategies with you today. I think it's something like 7 or 8 or 9, but I want to say, even picking 1 or 2 of these things to try out in your written communications can be really transformative. All right, so tip number 2, I guess tip number 2, because the last one was number 1. All right, so we're going to call this tip the what, the why, and the how. And here's what it's all about. So in every communication you write to families, consider orienting it around a what, a why, and a how. Okay, so what is the thing that you want parents or caregivers to do? Why is it important, and how can they act upon that? The trick is really great at fostering very clear, action-oriented communication, because it guarantees you're going to very clearly articulate what's the very important thing, I want you to do or know, why does it matter, and what can you do about it? As you can probably imagine, this strategy is really great for building parental efficacy, which is a critical ingredient in that homeschool partnership that we're all aiming to build. So let's just look at a very clear example of a what, a why, and a how. So a what, let's say we were in the literacy domain, we might say we want families to ask their child questions at school. Why is it important? Well, we have lots of reasons why it's important, so we could pick one to share with families. Asking questions builds your child's language skills and thinking skills. It lets them know that you're interested in their experiences, and it gives you insights into their feelings about school, right? Well, that was 3 reasons. So we've told them what's really important. Why is it important? Okay, now, as a parent, when I know something is important, I want to do something about it, right? So we give them a how. In this activity, it would be in the morning. What's one thing ask your child, what's one thing you're looking forward to doing or learning at school today, right? So we've given them something they can do. We've actually attached it to an everyday routine in the morning, right? When your child wakes up, let's say. Anytime you can attach that how to an everyday daily moment or routine that you know is going to repeat again and again in the family's life, it helps ensure that it's really, really doable. All right, so we just played that out kind of like in a very controlled setting, but let's look at an actual piece of communication. This that and hold it up against the what, the why, and the how. And this is an email that a friend of mine received from her son's 4th grade math teacher, 4th grade homeroom teacher. Okay, it just read subject, math and Zev. Hi, Jana. Zev got 66% on their test. We just went over it, and there were a lot of things that went well. On the division is where there were issues, mostly small mistakes. We're going to work on this after break during math club. Hope you guys have a great week. All right. What Janet shared with me about receiving this communication is that it inspired absolute panic. And I believe it did that because it did not have a what, a why, or a how, right? It was important enough to this teacher to send home an email letting the parent know Zev's struggling with their math. But like, why is this important to know, right? I mean, we can make a lot of assumptions, but why did she think it was important? And then what's Jana going to do about it, right? The message just says, have a great week. Well, Jana spent that week worrying about math, right? If there had been a very clear, how can you address this at home, it would have been an entirely different experience. So I just kind of took a stab at rewriting this email, and I'm just going to read it to you now. And I'll highlight how, we worked in a what, a why, and a how. Hi, Jana. I'm reaching out because Zev might need a pep talk about math, right? We have our what. He struggled a bit on his math test this week and seemed upset about it. And the better he feels about math, the better he'll do in math. So this is why it matters. He's going to feel better in math. He's going to do better in math if he feels better in math, right? I'm hoping you can assure him there's no need to worry. This is my how. What am I going to do about it? Lots went well on the test. The mistakes were small. He just needs a bit more practice with division. There will be lots of time for practice after break. Okay, so I'm assuring her that we're going to take care of this. Then I'm going to give her one more how. If he mentions the test or seems worried, you can read him this note from me. I see how hard you work in math. We'll work together after break to make sure division clicks. You've got this. Have so much fun over break, Miss C. All right, so I've scaffolded this now in 2 ways. I've given her 2 hows. She can give him a pep talk, or if that's tricky, she can read him this note from the teacher. So we have a much different experience when we add in a what, a why, and a how, because it's very clear why we're sending the email or the note and what we want families to do about it. All right, let's move on to our next tip. I have to say this one is my absolute favorite, and I'm just completely obsessed with doing this. The next tip is tip 3, and it's leveling counts. And by that, I mean text leveling. So we know that readability equals access. Okay, a sidebar here is that obviously we are sharing everything with you on screen right now in English, but a key piece of access is making sure that you are doing all of these tricks and tips applied to families' communications and families' home language. So that kind of goes without saying throughout all of these tips. To communicate with families in their home language and apply all of these tips to them. Okay, so readability. We know that the average reading level in the United States is 7th or 8th grade. But here's what we also know. We know that cognition decreases under stress. What parent do you know that is not stressed out, right? We're getting these emails or these forms at the end of our day. We've got our kids running around anything you send to a parent, you know they've got children around. So you can automatically assume that their cognition is slightly compromised because they are juggling a lot. But there are these really simple tricks we can apply to help ensure that we are bringing our reading level down so that families can just look at it and comprehend it at a glance. Okay, the first thing you can always do is look for short sentences. So whenever you're debating period, comma, go for the period. Also, eliminate uncommon words or jargon. And I think this can be hard because for two reasons. One, there's a lot of jargon in the field of education, right? We're using a lot of high level terms. Also, we're supposed to be experts, right? So we can sometimes write to include the jargon because we want to really sound like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. But nothing says you know what you're talking about more than being able to explain it in the most scaled down, simplistic, straight to the point way. So whenever possible, just ditch the jargon and go for the straightest, most clear path forward to understanding. Look for fewer syllables in your word and also fewer descriptors and more actions. So adjectives, they're lovely, but go for the action over the adjective. Okay. We want to know the doing of what you are saying. Okay. Here's where the real magic trick comes in. I'm going to show you some communication that I received. Okay. You ready? I'm not reading this whole thing. Don't worry, in case you were starting to panic that this was going to be the next 20 minutes of your life. Okay. Here we go. I'm just going to read a couple sentences. Student advisory groups. In keeping with our goal of increasing student voice in our district, I'm launching student advisory groups to the superintendent. That was one sentence. These groups, designed for high school, middle school, and upper elementary students, will serve as a platform for our students to actively participate in shaping the decisions and planning process that impact their educational experiences. That was another sentence. Just note that if you cannot read a sentence in one breath, which I could barely do there, it is just at a far too high reading level. And case in point, when I leveled this with by the way, the text leveling program that comes free with every computer, which is Fleisch Kincaid, this came in at a 13th grade, right? So this is college level text. But when we apply those strategies, like we wave our magic wand here, we can go to the next slide. Here's how we brought it down to a 5th grade reading level. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences. So right off the bat, our goal is to increase student voice. Hearing from students helps us create a school that's more inclusive and supportive. All right. I've broken it up into sentences, used very simple language. That's why we're launching student advisory groups. What are student advisory groups? These groups give students a chance to meet with a superintendent every month. Students will share ideas and concerns, period. They'll join in discussions about school policies, period. They'll have the chance to help make decisions that affect their class and the whole school, period. Okay, so you can see that we shortened things up, we eliminated the jargon, we went for periods instead of commas, and suddenly we are at a 5th grade reading level. All right, next tip is all about scaffolding. As educators, you know all about scaffolding. And when it comes to communicating with families, scaffolding leads to strength-based engagement. When we ask families to do something, it has got to be doable. Lack of doability immediately activates the stress response. And it leads to families saying, this isn't for me, I can't do this. It breaks down trust. And it just, on a really fundamental, does not feel good. You start to dread those emails, right? When you're going to click and you're like, I can't do this. So we always want to include scaffolding. Scaffolding creates the path and supports the path to action. And it gives families that can-do feeling, which again leads to trust and leads to partnership. So how can we scaffold our communications? Let's just look at a really concrete example. So this is the robo email that I get when my child is absent and I forgot to call to tell the school, which happens not infrequently. It says, hello, it's MBE. Your child is marked as absent today. Please contact us as soon as possible to let us know the reason for your child's absence. Couple things here. Who is MBE? If I'm stressed, like I who is this organization? I mean, I can use my deductive reasoning, but like, I'm very well oriented around the school. For many families, getting this would immediately activate this feeling of like, who is this coming from? What is happening? So that's one area that where we don't have any scaffolding, right? We don't have support. Then we have a call to action, which is to call as soon as possible. So there's an urgency to that call to action, but there is no phone number. So now, best case scenario, I go searching for this phone number. Worst case scenario, I just don't have it in me. I can't find it. I don't have the time. So let's just look at how we could scaffold this. Again, two very simple things we can do. Hello, it's Milton Brook Elementary. Okay, now I know who's calling me because I know the name of my child's school. Your child is marked as absent today. Please call, and then we have the number as soon as possible. But I added another piece of scaffolding here. I happen to know from making this phone call many times that I'm going to get an answering machine, and I'm just going to have to list the reason for their absence. So to help scaffold that, which can be scary and overwhelming, we can go back because I just want to just mention that. We added this line, leave us a message with your child's name and the reason for their absence, right? So they don't need me to, give the history, my child's health history on that call, which I often do when I'm nervous. I start like just rambling. Here we have a very clear, scaffolding where we're trying to actually provide even more support for that reach out. But there's another level of scaffolding that we could also be giving here. And that's on the next slide. Okay. So that first, we have our introduction, we have the phone number, and we have the bit about leaving the message and what to say. We're also going to add another paragraph, which again, just holds that family. So we're going to add to this, we are here for you. If it ever becomes difficult to get your child to school, please reach out. There may be ways we can help. Call 413-238-7789 and ask to speak with Will. If you need an interpreter, let us know. I need a Spanish interpreter. So here we are for a family who is really struggling to get their child to school and needs more support. We are giving them a way to get that support. We're helping to sort of normalize it by naming it. And we're also going to let them know who is picking up that phone. His name is Will, right? We're making it a human being. These are scary, overwhelming things that we're asking families to do, to talk about their vulnerabilities and their challenges with us. And we're also scaffolding the reach out in terms of how to ask for an interpreter if necessary. So this would be kind of that added level of scaffolding that, again, holds families. It shows them like, we've got you. We are with you, which again builds trust and partnership. All right. I think we're moving on to Mary.
So Rebecca has given you 4 incredible tips for how to craft a great piece of communication and keep families in your mind and structure the communication in a way that's really going to resonate and support and get them what they need. And so now we're going to talk about how to get that message opened and how to maybe use some of the marketers' bag of tricks in order to get them to take action. We recognize everybody on this call is probably wearing a lot of hats. You have more to do than time to do it. You don't have a professional writer or graphic designer on staff who can create beautiful communications for you. You're sending these things out at the end of the day when you've already had a full workday. Everything that we're sharing with you today, we're hoping is going to be the kind of thing you can just layer into your communication strategy in a very simple way. So with no further ado, let's look at some of the marketers' tricks that we're going to share with you. And I do want to go back to what Rebecca named as that umbrella tip, which is really centering what for me I would call my audience, what Rebecca will call parents, since she's communicating with parents directly. So keep them in your mind whenever you sit down to write. What are they doing? Where are they on the other side of the communication? What are they doing? What concerns might they have right now that this is going to be weaving into? And what would it take to help them feel successful? Because a winning communication is one in which the person on the other side feels like you just gave them a win. So how can you help them feel like they're winning? So once you've kind of got that centered, then we'll move on to the first big marketer's tip, which is your subject line is your headline. I actually know people and companies that all they do is spend their time focused on the headline, the subject line, because if they don't open your communication, then your amazing message, your critical action is just not going to be consumed. They're not going to get that message. So you really want to take the time to write a great subject line, because this is your opportunity to get your message read, and too often it's wasted. Unfortunately, this sample is from my own inbox. I have 2 school-age kids. This subject line doesn't tell me anything about what's inside. Sometimes I open these and there's 1 item, sometimes there's 10 items. Sometimes they're really critical, sometimes it's more fun and lighthearted, and I never know unless I open it. So you've got to hope that I'm going to be inspired to be the parent that reads each one of these. And unfortunately, most parents have a lot going on and they probably aren't going to do that. So instead of taking this approach in which parents have to kind of just hope for the best when they read it, take the most critical information and make it your subject line. So, pulling out things that I know that I have a lot of families that could take advantage of benefits programs. I'm going to put that in the subject line. I know that I have an upcoming college and career fair. I've got new seniors. Their families are going to feel like, oh, I really got to nail this. Put that in the subject line. Whatever you believe the majority of the biggest groups of populations, or the population that you're really focused on. If you've got a strategic initiative that's really focused on supporting a particular population, put that in the subject line, because it's an opportunity that you don't want to waste to get the audience you're really trying to talk to get excited and engaged with your content. So just start right there. Spend the time, think about it. What is going to get this communication opened? So then the next thing, so now you've written an amazing amazing subject line, and you're ready to get your message into that format. And what you want to think about next is, how can I make this really bite-sized? Oftentimes we have a lot of information that we're trying to share with families, and we want to share all the details, but busy lives, parents have busy lives. We have a lot going on, that. And when you give a lot of information, it makes it hard for people to find what's most important to them. So you really want to focus on thinking about, how do I make this as simple as possible, and kind of reduce the denseness of your communication. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to communicate with families, so you want to make each one count. So now we're going to look at an example that, again, is a real world taken from a friend's inbox. And you can see, if you were to read the email, I'm not going to go in and read the whole thing to you, but you would find that it's full of warm wishes. You would find that it's full of sweet messages, call outs to members of the community that are beloved, a couple of pieces of information about funding, projects that are really important to the sender of this communication. You'd find that everything in here is written with the intention of sharing quality information with the recipient, but you'll notice it's also really dense. And unless you were to spend the time reading through everything, you would probably miss what if I were sending this, was thinking, oh, this is my big thing that I want everybody to know. So let's go to the next slide, where I've called it out. Mark your calendars, because we're talking about merging our schools. This is the kind of thing that the community is going to have feelings about. That the community is going to have feelings about this. They're going to want to be heard. They're going to be concerned about what it means. What does it mean for transportation? What does it mean for members of the community? What does it mean for beloved programs? How is it going to impact the budget? This is the kind of thing that is likely going to become a major communication, like topic of conversation. This is the kind of thing that you want to know that you are building buy-in in order for it to be a success. So we're going to give that its own treatment. We're going to say, instead of communicating about everything, we're going to make that the focus, and we're going to make it really easy to process by making it bite-sized. So we rewrote it to say, just focus on this. Mark your calendars. Your attendance is important. We want people to feel like, okay, I need to pay attention. They want to hear from me. We're considering merging our school with another school. You're getting to the point right away with like exactly the information you want them to walk away with. Then we've called out the where and the when so that it's easy to see and to, put that right into their calendar. And then we've also added at the bottom, we're going to answer questions. We want feedback. We want to hear your concerns, your ideas, and that your input matters. And then we've put in there that Spanish interpreters will be at the event. So that's just like making it bite-sized, making it simple, making it accessible, getting people to an event, because you are decreasing the likelihood that further down the road, once decisions have been made, all those people are flooding your phone line saying, what the heck is going on? Why didn't you tell me about this? So we're calling it out. We're putting it out there. We're letting them know that we care. So that's step one. And now we're going to make it even better. So we're going to use formatting. Simple trick. And it is shocking to me as a recipient of many, many communications from a variety of teachers and administrators who I know want the best for my kids. It is shocking to me how often I get email that is not formatted in a way that helps me process it and take the action they want me to take. So let's format it. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the research here. So for basically 2 decades, people have been researching how is digital content processed. That's emails, websites, anything that we're reading on a screen. And they have found again and again that dense content, often if it's a wall of text, if the user is just trying to quickly get the point, and they're not hugely committed to the message, that the hotspots, the red, that's the content that they're consuming. The yellow, they're kind of processing it a little bit, and then the rest of it is just getting lost. So using that formatting is really important if you want them to process your message, if you really want to get through. So we took that same message, we considered the impact of the F shape, as it's called, and we reformatted it completely. The subject line I rewrote to be merger meeting, your input matters. I threw an emoticon up there in the subject line because those are shown to increase people's connection with the message and get that read. And because we're trying to be really accessible, I went ahead and put the Spanish in there as well, the Spanish translation. I don't speak Spanish, but I did use Google Translate. I want to be transparent about that because there probably are people here who would say, I wouldn't write it that way. But we know it's close enough and it's going to get the message out there to our families, our Spanish-speaking families, that it matters that they can come and that they're reading this message. So we're putting that right up front, right at the top again, using that emoticon to say, hey, there's going to be a translation at the bottom of this message. And then I use judicious use of color to say, we're considering merging our school. Pop it out. When? October 7th at 7 o'clock. That's what you want to put in your calendar. And then I use bullets to say, we will be telling you about the merger. We will be answering your questions. We will be listening to your feedback because your input helps us make informed decisions. So using that research that shows that you need to help people's eye go to the right information through the use of those little emoticons, through the use of color, judicious, do not make it a rainbow. Don't play with fonts, please, because different fonts don't stand out. Use color and bolding, but be really, really intentional. Say, what do I want people to know from this message? And use that. So I'm confident now that we've done what we can through formatting to make this message get through to our families and hopefully fill that reading room so that we are having a great conversation. And we're also messaging to families that we really care. We want you to be involved. So again, you're getting ahead of any potential conflicts down the road around, did you communicate with families when it really mattered? So now we're going to go on to your call to action. So in the marketing lingo, it's called your CTA. And it's, again, surprising to me how often the call to action, which is what you want your reader to do, is buried, which is just, kind of baffling to me, because if you want me to do something, please be clear about it. And I actually write my personal email this way. If I need something from somebody, I call it out. So this is a version of an email that I received. I have a new high schooler, so obviously emotions are a little high in our home. And we want her to be successful. So I got this message and I read it. It said, hope you enjoyed the first week of school. This is the first communication I've received from the new principal. This email is to inform you that high school students will be getting their textbooks next Monday through Wednesday. Please be sure to bring a backpack. I've attached a newsletter for you to enjoy. Have a wonderful weekend. That was everything. So I read it and I was like, okay, I guess she wants to make sure that my daughter has a backpack. That was my takeaway. So if you go to the next slide, that's when I looked through the email, that's kind of my takeaway. She wants me to make sure my kid has a backpack. Okay, I've got it. So not only was that not the most important takeaway, if we think about Rebecca's tip on scaffolding, if I didn't happen to have a backpack, then I might be a little stressed out immediately with this first communication telling me backpacks are really important at this school. So just layering something in like, if you need a backpack, we have, here's how to access one, or just bring a bag, that would have been helpful just to maybe decrease the stress level a little bit. However, it turned out that the backpack was not actually the most important piece of information in that message. When I did read the newsletter, I learned that there was actually some important stuff that I personally really did need to know. So below the generic titles about upcoming events and important reminders was a thing that I had actually been looking for, and my family had been talking about all summer, which was, how do we get the bus pass? I live in an urban area, and you can get a free bus pass so your kid can take the municipal bus to school. And we had been actively looking for that information, but it wasn't until I opened the newsletter a couple weeks later that I found out, this had the information I had been looking for. When I scrolled down through the newsletter, I actually also saw that there were forms to fill out to access other benefits programs. I happen to know that, as I'm sure many of you do, that those forms directly tie to funding for schools. So they actually really need me to fill out that form. But it wasn't until I clicked into the newsletter, I read it, and then I found it on my own. So going back to our CTA, you really want to make sure that the thing you need families to do is obvious. So next time around, if I were to rewrite this email, I would definitely recommend that she, pull that information out, right? I hope you enjoyed your first week of school. To keep things running smoothly, please read the attached bulletin for important information, including getting the complimentary bus pass, getting students enrolled in the education benefits programs, and picture day details. I know a lot of families actually really love those pictures, and that's going to get them to read it because that's our goal, right? I threw a button in there, which I'll come back to. And also make sure your student brings a backpack next week because they will begin getting their high school textbooks. Probably would throw in there, if you need a backpack or that, then here's a resource, or just change the word backpack to a bag, and then it becomes slightly more accessible for families. So just making it obvious what you want people to do is going to increase your success rate. You have a reason for sending this message, so let's make it a success. So now I want to talk just a little bit about the button. So research shows that people like to click buttons, and you can actually very easily, using simple design programs, create little buttons, little graphics. You can use Canva, you can use Microsoft Paint. And if you are lucky enough to have fancier options at your fingertips, you can use those. But putting those into your message, you can do it in pretty much any email communication platform, and linking that so that it goes to a location. So when you put attachments in your emails, you're more likely to get spam filtered. Spam filters really don't like attachments. And on top of that, a lot of people are uncomfortable opening attachments because unless you're a highly trusted source, and even if you are, people are really concerned that when they download things onto their computer, that they could be introducing malware. So don't do it. Just find, like, you can use a Google Drive. You can use a lot of classrooms have classroom websites. Upload things, host them, and then add the link, because it will increase your deliverability and it will increase the likelihood that people will actually go and access that information. So just one last tip, and then I think we'll be transitioning to some Q&A pretty soon. I strongly encourage you to think of these long, dense emails as digests. Make them multi-item communications that are just reorganize them so that they are really digestible. So this is an actual example from another friend of mine, and it's got kind of a wild amount of color going on here. It has 9 calendar updates, 2 different food program announcements that were separated in different sections, 2 different curriculum spotlights, again, separated in different sections, and paragraphs of action items from the PTO as well as a big chunk about the cell phone policy for the district. So you can tell immediately, thinking back to that graphic that I showed you, that a lot of information is going to get missed. And an easy way to improve when you do have those dense communications that you need to send, because you do have, sometimes those multi-item communications need to go out, is just to conceive of it as a digest. So we took that same email and we did a little bit of reformatting, and we put some bullets at the top so that you can see here are the sections of the email. There was the fall schedule, which is going to include community events, and it's also going to include the picture day. We've got 2 different food programs we're going to be covering, the cell phone policy, and some curriculum highlights. So just using those items, put them right at the top so that I, as the reader, am saying, oh, I actually need information about the food programs, or, oh, the thing that matters to me is my kid's really into computer science. I want to read that thing about what's going on in the curriculum. So when you put those way up at the top using bullets, that formatting strategy, then you're signaling to people there's information in here that is for you, even if that first chunk isn't the thing for you. You're not tuning out, putting it into your for later or for never folder, but you're saying, okay, here's what I need, and you're going to go to the information that matters to you. So just take kind of a digest approach, because it's going to help your reader find the information that matters to them. So with all of those tips under your belt, and as Rebecca said, there are a lot of them, so just choose the thing that you feel like is really accessible and doable for you. We're going to just quickly share our tips one last time. On the getting read side, I'll say that, remember, the subject line is your headline. They're not going to get to the content if they don't open it. So use the subject line to your advantage. Keep it bite-sized, simple. Use formatting to call out what is the most important piece of information here. Make it crystal clear what action you want to take. And make it if you've got 10 things to cover, make it into a digest. Help your reader find the information that is going to matter to them.
And on the content end, we always want to make sure we're pausing to reflect, to make sure that it's accessible, that it's doable, that it's strength-based, that it's going to feel good. Whenever possible, we can give our communications the what, the why, and the how to make sure they're crystal clear. Level your messaging, whatever it is. Obviously, giving it to families in their home language as well. and adding in that scaffolding so that everything feels doable and strength-based. We also just want to say that we always want to consider, who's receiving that message, right? We want to be centering our communications on our families, on their strengths, on their lived experiences. This is going to be just the foundation of the trusting relationships we build with them. And I just want to throw in there that if we are doing all of these things and we are creating partnership, we're going to end up in a universe where we don't have to be the only ones communicating, right? That is the next level step, is how can our families be communicating with each other? How can they be contributing to writing our digests and our updates? Because if we are really creating a partnership, that's the thing, right? That comes out of it, is families are more fully baked into these communications, and they become the voice of some of these communications as well, together with us. All right, I think we went through everything on our list.
Great. Well, yes, you did. You got through all those tips in record time and shared so much great information. I was taking lots of notes, and I know those watching were as well. Lots to take away. But I'm going to give you both just a quick break while I mention another great resource, and it's actually a digest or a bulletin of all the great tips that Rebecca and Mary shared. So as you're thinking, sitting down to write that next communication, you can use this handy tip sheet for more examples and quick summaries of what we went over today. And we encourage you to share it with the rest of your team so that your whole organization is kind of on the same page with the best ways to engage with families and give them the information that they really need to participate in the school community and as partners in their children's learning. So we're dropping that link to get the tip sheet into chat, and we'll also share it with you by email. I also want to thank again ParentPowered for sponsoring today's webinar and just share a little bit of information. ParentPowered is an evidence-based family engagement program for children birth through 12th grade. And the approach to family engagement can lead to as much as 2 to 3 months of additional growth over the course of a school year. And one of the best parts about it, not that learning growth isn't really the best part, but some additional benefits is that it doesn't require any extra work for your team. So it's really a win-win for your organization, for your families, and your students. You can learn more about ParentPowered at parentpowered.com, and we're dropping that URL into chat as well. All right, let's go ahead and get to some of the great questions that we've had come in. We had lots of questions, Rebecca, around scaffolding. So in one of your examples, you had that acronym for MBE, and someone just asked, that they were acknowledged that they use a lot of acronyms as well, and sometimes just to keep things shorter. So how do you kind of balance that, keeping things short with confusion with acronyms?
Yeah, so we keep things short to lower the cognitive lift, right? And what sometimes happens if we shorten things too much is it increases the cognitive lift. So the sentence is shorter, but the mental capacity to comprehend the sentence is not, right? So I think we want to kind of weigh those two things against each other. I would say certainly in the first half of the year, when you can assume that many of your families are new to your community and have new students, I would write out the whole name of the school. Then I would wean away from that by writing out the whole name of the school, and in parentheses you can put MBE, right? Or you could use the name and then MBE in the next, later down in the paragraph, and then eventually wean away from it. But I would really, it's kind of like scaffolding that transition so that you're sure that the point at which you start using acronyms, you have oriented your families around what those letters stand for.
That's a great way to transition people so everybody knows what those stand for before you launch into them. In the last scaffolding example, which was the absence one, so MBE again, in the second rewrite of it, it got really long. So it had great information to support families, but was it too long? Was it again, balancing that, providing information, but if someone opens that and just sees this really long message, does that just cause folks to shut down?
So this is where we probably benefit from Mary and I teaming up, right? We could use formatting to help with that. But the truth is that we're going to get what we need out of it, right? Like, I know to call the school and I have the phone number. If I am a family who is really struggling to get my child to school, we do need a way to really clearly communicate that support is available. So I think, and Mary, talk to me about what you would do to take, because I would say this is an example of where we need more information, right? We want to keep things short, but sometimes in order to really scaffolding, because scaffolding is going to take up some space, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you might do where there's really essential scaffolding but it is going to increase the length of something?
So, all right, what would I do? So let's see. I would probably use I would probably throw in a header above "We're here for you." I would say maybe something like "Need more support," bold. Because that way, if I do, I know, oh, I should read that paragraph. If I don't, I'm not going to worry about it. I might break up the paragraph. I'm thinking maybe probably after "There are ways we can help." And so that way we're decreasing, thinking about that F shape coloring. If you remember, like, people tend to lose the bottom right side of a paragraph. So I would probably make that 2 paragraphs, add that header to say, like, we're here, like, if you need help, we're here, something like that, that's going to, like, for the readers that it matters. And then I guess I would probably call out, if you need an interpreter to let us know. I would probably make that its own paragraph. I know that we're creating a visually longer message, but we're breaking it up in a way that is easier for people to cognitively process. It's not really the length as much as it is density. Density is not your friend.
Those are great suggestions, and actually kind of segues into another question. I know we're at the top of the hour, but we'll go just a little bit longer. Where someone's asking, is it maybe better to send, multiple messages rather than one long one?
I think there's, so my recommendation would be, if there's something, so let's take that merger example. You know that that's going to be a hot ticket item. You know that that's going to be something that is talked about through the community and could potentially, if not handled very delicately, you could end up creating factions and negative feelings in the community. So that's the kind of thing that I would say, that's its own message. That's its own message, because it really matters that people feel like you're there, you're listening, and you're there to help. So that is the kind of thing that I would say that doesn't belong in your long digest message. You would probably do a call back to it, but you wouldn't use that solely as the message. So things like those curriculum updates, the school calendar, like things where you say, this is kind of ongoing background information. I don't need anybody to take an action today, but I want to make sure that they know. Put that in your bulletin. You can go ahead and if people feel like each time they open your message, they are getting information that's useful and relevant, if they feel like you're respectful of their time, if they feel like you're somebody that they want to hear from because you give them what they need, and that they feel like they're in that trusting relationship, going all the way back to the big one. If you take away one thing, if you're using every communication in a way that's really respectful, so that you're building trust with them, then they're going to open up more messages from you.
Going back to that initial point, actually, Mary, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Something that comes to mind for me is, we talked about that warm information as something to consider for the start of the year, but actually is ongoing. So those are going to be the people in families' lives who have a deep understanding of families' needs. So if you've got a communication going out that a particular family is going to care a lot about, or a particular population within your school, give those liaisons or that community-based organization a heads up and say, like, I just sent out this email, or I could use your help orienting families around it, right? Talk it up. you can have your family representatives really, you know, let families know, hey, this thing is happening, right? You've got, you can have it echoing throughout your community, coming from many different voices, and ideally it's those trusted relationships. So any opportunity you have to kind of communicate about your communications with the people and places in families' lives, the better, because they're just going to be getting a lot of feelings of trust and connection when, behind the communications you're sending.
Multi-channel communication is always helpful.
Yeah, I think that's
Using
a
your
great tip. In our world of overwhelm, yeah, taking many avenues to reach people and helping people find what they're looking for where they're at is a great tip. We'll add that as a tip. Well, we're a little over the hour. I'm going to throw one last, I think, quick question to you, Mary. Is there a preferred color to draw people's eyes in these written communications?
I have developed an affinity for like a deep red, not a bright red, which can be like an alarm color, but a deep red, because it's both visually something that stands out. It's not confused with hyperlinks. If you choose like a blue, it's going to be a hyperlink. Lighter colors like oranges or yellow, obviously yellows, but even some greens can be lost. So that I've just developed it kind of a go-to with that, but I don't know that there's a single color that I would say that is the color to use. But I would say whatever color you use, take a close look and make sure that it actually stands out from the rest of your text, that it's, be consistent instead of using don't use the rainbow. Just don't do that, please. And and just maybe close the email, open it back up and look at it again and say, where does my eye go? Does it go to this or not?
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, I always think after you write something, walk away, come back and see how it sits again, both visually and from what you've written. So all right. Well, we've exceeded our time together. I wish we had more, but thank you again for being here, Rebecca and Mary, and thanks to everybody who joined us and for all of these great questions. If you have questions or are interested in learning more about Parent Powered's Family Engagement Program, we hope you'll reach out. We always look forward to those conversations and working with you as educators to help improve family engagement. Thanks again for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at. And we hope to learn together again soon.